Gail from District Attorney Michael Morrissey's office, and thank you all for coming. I'm so happy to be able to help bring this program to Norfolk. We've partnered with Evan George, the trainer that was handing out the flyers, and he'll be giving a great presentation. I learn something new every time I sit through him. He's fantastic, and I know that you're going to be thrilled with it.
It's wine company.
For me, this is one of my favorite events to be part of. Like I said, I learn something new every single time, and I'm sure that you're going to be thrilled with this, but it's never a time that you think that you need to be prepared. And he'll talk about different things like what happened in Lawrence with the gas explosions and with the houses, and everyone had to evacuate, and no one was prepared for that, and the tornado and on the Cape when people had to evacuate. So you want to be prepared, and hopefully you never need to use these bags, but they're good to have. I have stuff that I'm actually going to supplement. That we have bags with things that we have from our office that I'll go through after, and it's really short, but so I'll hand it over to Evan, and thank you all. And if you want to, if anyone has any questions, just raise your hand and he can address those. Or I think the police are coming as well, and then the fire department. And we have Farah from the state police that can help too if you have any questions. So I'll hand it over to Evan. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This is a lovely building. I don't think I've been to Norfolk before, or at least I did this training 3 years ago, and I may have been right at this center. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for having also the fire department and state police. And as stated, my name is Evan George, and I'm here with the Massachusetts Office on Disability in the Department of Homeland Security to talk about emergency preparedness. And this whole training comes about from Hurricane Katrina. For some quick trivia, who remembers what year was Hurricane Katrina? 2005, very good. So in 2005, Hurricane Katrina completely devastated the city of New Orleans, resulted in about 1,800 deaths. What they then did is what's called an after-action report to try to figure out what happened, what went wrong. And one of the things they discovered was that half of the people who died, so now roughly 900 people, were either someone with a disability or a senior citizen. And at first, this confused everyone. They didn't understand why would senior citizens die at almost double the rate of everyone else. And so what they did was they looked at New Orleans' emergency plan. And what they found was that at no time did it take into account the unique needs that seniors might have. So for example, if we tell you all to evacuate, and you are maybe deaf or hard of hearing, how do we know that you actually got that alert? Or if we tell you to go to a shelter, and that shelter is 15 miles away, you don't have a vehicle, you have issues with mobility, how do we know you actually got from where you are to the shelter? Believe it or not, here in America, before 2005, we never really thought through emergency logistics at that level. So what I do is I travel around across Massachusetts, sometimes virtually, sometimes in person. That's one of the reasons why I continue to wear a mask, is because I go to so many different senior centers and I interact with so many people with disabilities. And I try to put on as many of these micro trainings as possible so that you all have a better understanding of what happens when Massachusetts does have a state level emergency, and most importantly, your individual preparedness. Because we can have the best plans possible, but this will almost always fall on the individuals to figure out what is happening and what do they need to do. So everyone here, you have a lot of different packets of information. If you want to, you can completely just leave it down and listen to what I have to say. I'm going to articulate all the highlights anyway. If you want to just tune me out a little bit and flip through it, this has about 5 times the information I'll be able to get to. But sometimes it helps me just to hold it in my hand. And so the first packet I'll be going through says the word "go" on it, if again you did want to follow along like being back in school. And as I mentioned, I'm here with the Office on Disability. Our phone number, email is listed 6 or 7 different times throughout this document. And really, we exist since the early 1980s, and we're just here to ensure that people with disabilities have full access to everyday life in Massachusetts. Now, what it means to have a disability really just means that you need assistance with one of life's major tasks. So if that is something as simple as going for a walk, as listening on the telephone, as trying to reach for something, bathing, anything like that, if you just need additional assistance, then you qualify as somebody who is protected under disability law. And here in Massachusetts, we have a lot of those protections. So if you ever have any questions around your rights, anything like that, we are just a great resource for you. Now, the first thing I want to highlight is actually about the 911 program, because chances are everyone here has already at one point in their lives had to call 911. And it's just very important that people understand how that system operates. So if you flip over to, I believe, page 5, what we have for you is something called the 911 Disability Indicator Form. And I believe here in Norfolk, they've even updated this paper.
Can I just interject?
Yes, please.
Sherry Norman, the Director of the Council on Aging. So we customized the form. It's available online, both on the Senior Center COA page as well as the Police Department page to fill out. We have hard copies here, and then Evan can tell you how it works.
Great. So everything I'm explaining today is across Massachusetts. Second trivia question. How many cities and towns are there in Massachusetts? There we go. 351. And some of them, about half, they can only rely on the state systems. They just don't have the finances to kind of do even more. Luckily here in Norfolk, you have this all online. And what this form does is it allows you to voluntarily disclose, which is just a fancy legal term I might use a couple times, and all that means is tell someone if you have a disability. Because here in Massachusetts, we don't keep a registry of people with disabilities. But for example, if you were to fill this out, you can either, again, bring it to your local police department, do it all online. Let's say you had to call 911. Operator picks up, hello, 911, what is your emergency? Well, if you're deaf or hard of hearing, for example, that'll now appear on the operator's screen. So now the operator, when they direct it to fire, EMS, whomever, they can say, oh, just so you know, you're going to Jill's house, Jill is deaf, you now need to make sure you do X, Y, or Z. So this will just give your first responders a little bit of additional information about you so they can better handle whatever the situation is. And again, you're fortunate here that you can do this all online. So if you don't want to deal with the form or the hassle of it. But again, if you know somebody who lives in another city or town next door, you think they could benefit from something like this, you can have them fill it out. And again, it'll only exist in the 911 system if you actually do call. People won't just be able to access that personal information. Now, how 911 works, it doesn't work the same way that it works maybe on television. When you call, it doesn't necessarily go to your local police station. We have roughly 200 stations across Massachusetts that work as regional hubs. So you call them, they figure out who you are, where you are, what's going on, and then they direct the closest first responder to get to you. Now, here in Massachusetts, if you call us on a landline, you are good. You are almost literally rooted into the system. We know who you are. We know where you are. When you call on a cell phone, it sometimes gets a little bit trickier for the state services because it might have to do with, well, who filed the cell phone plan, so on and so forth. But luckily, here, we can find you if we need to. We can do this really cool thing called triangulation. Even if you have a cell phone that was created 20 years ago, we can create 3 cell phone towers, make a little triangle, and we can figure out where you are in the middle of that triangle if, again, we really need to find you. Now, also, here in Massachusetts, you can text to 911. And even if you think here you may never use this, you might know younger people who all they do is text. But the reason this is such a great service is there's a lot of times people want to call for help, but they don't want the person next to them to know they're calling. So if you were to imagine it's late at night, someone's in an Uber, a taxi, a Lyft, they feel unsafe, they want to call for help, they don't want the driver to know they're calling. Here in Massachusetts, they can quietly text to 911. Also, you can call, and if right now I were to call 911 and I stayed nice and quiet, the operator just doesn't assume it's a wrong number. Because there's a lot of reasons why, again, someone might call and not start speaking. If you think of maybe a domestic violence, if you think maybe the person's choking, they can't verbally communicate, things like that. So sometimes what will happen is the operator will start asking yes or no questions. Things like, do you need help? Press 4 for yes. Do you need the fire department? Press 1. So you can always navigate these systems. And the reason I like to spend so much time on this is because the number one measurement of will you survive any first aid situation, whatever it is, the number one measurement we have is how quickly did you call 911. Every second that goes by just increases the risk of what could happen. So when in doubt, use these services, make sure to give 911 a call. Now, you call us when you need help. When we want to call you, we use what's called reverse 911. It might translate a little awkward for the camera, but people here have probably heard an Amber Alert. And you're looking at your phones trying to figure out what's going on. That's an example of us calling you. And it's just a communication blast. So we'll try to interrupt any TV you're watching, any radio that you're listening to. Some systems we can call all the landlines, trying to upgrade it to all the cell phones. But on top of it, there are two big tools that we have for you that you can get information in the moment. And this is, besides the free goodies you get, probably the most important thing I'm going to share with you. And the first, I believe, on the Go packet is on page 14. See how good my memory is. And what it is a phone number. So whenever you need help, you always call 911. When you need information, particularly information during an emergency, the phone number we have for you is 211. It is run by MEMA, the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We are currently using it as somewhat of a COVID hotline as well. So if you were to call right now, it might be an automated press 1 for this, press 2 for that. But during any state service, this is staffed up with a team of people, and they are there to answer questions like, where is your shelter? What is going on? What direction should I head into? Because in all of those 351 cities and towns, you all have two things. You have a local emergency manager. If you have a big city like Boston or Worcester, it's a paid position. This is all that person does. If you live in a smaller town or city, it might just be the fire chief, the head of your police department. Also, every city and town has their own different emergency plan. And one thing we do, which sounds counterintuitive, is we don't just pass it out to everyone to have. Part of this is because we don't want people to know where will vulnerable populations be during these sort of situations. But the second reason, and really the big one, is we can, again, have the best plans possible, but we really don't know what the event's going to look like. So if I told you all right now where your primary shelter is, you'd probably write it down, and then if something were to happen, you would think, oh yeah, this is where we go. This is what that person said. But 2 years from now, if it's a tornado, and that tornado is heading right to that shelter, we would have changed it in the moment. So we need you all to adapt the way that we are, which is, again, the phone number to call is 211. And you are probably some of the only people in Norfolk that actually know that phone number now. Because what always happens is people panic, understandably, call 911. Everyone calls the same phone number at the same time. It kind of messes with the system. But also, those operators, they don't have the most up-to-date information. The people with MEMA, 211, they have it. So make sure it's always 911 for help, 211 for information. The second cool communication tool we have for you, I think this is back on page 7, is an application for your smartphone. It has a little bit of an odd name. It's called Ping, P-I-N-G, like ping pong. The number 4. It says incorporated at the top. It works half a second easier if you type in alerts. And what this is again, an application for a smartphone. A smartphone is any phone that can go on the internet. I can show you how to download it afterwards if you'd like. It's free for you, and what I mean by that is we bought this with your tax dollars, so you might as well take advantage of it. Download, accept. It just lives on your phone. And for example, about 2.5 years ago, I was giving a training in Plymouth. I got a little buzz on my phone, I quickly checked it, and it said, shelter in place, there's a tornado 6 miles away. Because it knew I was standing 6 miles from the tornado, because it uses GPS, global positioning satellites, it can figure out where you are, and it'll only give you a little alert if, again, you are within the disaster radius of an event. I've had it for about 3 years. I think I've gotten 3 alerts. One was that tornado. The other 2, I live in Dorchester, and just some flooding was going on. So it just let me know about the flooding. So I highly recommend, again, if you have a phone that can go on the internet, download this, let it just chill there. Doesn't steal your data or anything like that. And again, it'll only bother you if you're within the radius. Just one important note on this is if you travel to, let's say, Florida, and there's a tornado right next to you, this isn't going to tell you that. We used, it's called federalism. Every state kind of does their own thing. And so Massachusetts, this is our system. Florida, they're going to have their own system for how to handle it. So I just went off a lot just on communication. I'm going to see if I can find my coffee behind me. Does anyone have any questions about anything I've said so far? All right, let's see how quickly I can do this. Now, before I go to your individual preparedness, there's still 3 different things in this packet I just want to make sure you all know about. And these are all a little bit towards the end. So on page 15, Massachusetts, if you were ever looking for programs, services, in-home support, mental health support, anything like that, you don't know where to go, you don't think you can afford it, my first stop would be the lovely people who work here. They probably know more about the services in this area than anyone. However, if you're still not able to get what you want, across Massachusetts, we have what's called mass options. There's a phone number at the bottom, there's an email address, there's a website. You can go on there, and they exist just to connect you with these services. So they'll be able to know what is in this area, how best to access it. It's just a great resource. The second, on the following page, is a program called Re-Equipment, just the word equipment with the letter R in front of it. What they exist to do is if you have old medical equipment, wheelchair, rocker, shower chair, cane, you don't use it anymore, just taking up space in an attic or a garage, you can call these people up, they'll pick it up, make it all nice and new, give it to somebody in need. Vice versa, if you need this type of equipment, you don't know where to go, you don't think you can afford it, they're a great resource to try to connect you with it and to bring it to you. So that's mass options, programs and services, re-equipment for equipment. And the last, and this was like a little individual handout you all got, is here in Massachusetts, it's called the Massachusetts Equipment Distribution Program. It's a very boring title for what is a very cool thing, which is if you have a hard time listening on the telephone, you can't hear what someone's saying, you're very soft-spoken, maybe you need a larger print on the numbers, if you need a cell phone that can do any of this, here in Massachusetts, we can actually get you this hardware. And by hardware, I mean the phone itself. So we actually have iPhones that have apps to try to help people who, again, just need enlarged font. Or it has what's called text-to-speech. So if you have a landline and you can't really hear that well, we have landline phones for you that'll just read out what the person's saying. So you can just read it while you're on the phone. So I can't promise everyone in here gets a free iPhone. There's obviously a little bit of a wait for that. But again, like most of these, very few people know that this service exists. So if you yourself need a new phone that might, again, louder amplification for sound, things like that, there's a phone number and website there as well, and they're there to help you get that hardware. You still have to pay for the cell phone or for the telephone plan, but they can hook you up with the phone itself. Yes?
Can I just interject, Evan, about the durable medical equipment? I don't know if everyone knows Janine Murphy, our public health nurse. A year ago, almost a year ago? I know, it's COVID time, so we don't remember. But nothing like a pandemic to make public health an important issue. So we actually got a state grant to form an alliance with Franklin and Rentham, the Medicomic Public Health Alliance. And Janine and her counterpart Lauren were the Rentham town nurses. They still are. But now we have a dedicated nurse, i.e. Janine usually, 15 hours a week. And she's here every Wednesday for one-on-one appointments. She's been bringing in a lot of wellness programming. I can't just say enough about Janine. She's wonderful. But on the durable medical equipment issue, we do have some here. We have a very small storage area, but we also now have access to Rentham. We have a little bit more space. And so if you need something, I would suggest rather than glut the landfill with more stuff, and by the way, some of those basic walkers, everybody, including re-equipment, aren't taking them anymore because there's, Medicare pays, so who cares, right? We're just gonna order it and then dump it when you don't need it anymore. But in any event, as Evan said, start with us, and then if we don't know, we can put you in touch with the right resources.
All right, thank you very much. And again, there's a lot more in this packet. I just don't have time to get through today, so I recommend on a lazy day, flip through it. But I'm going to now start talking about the other one that has a little emergency bag on it, about your individual preparedness. And so there are hypothetically 500 emergencies you could face. We could have a tornado, a chemical spill, a terrorist attack, a hurricane. We haven't had a hurricane in Massachusetts since 1991. We almost got one a few months ago, but it quickly downgraded. Now, regardless of the event, we're only really going to ask you to do one of two things. We're either going to ask you to evacuate, to get out of where you are, to head to a shelter, or the second, what we now may think of as quarantining, but we still use the language shelter in place, which basically means do not go outside, stay where you are. Now, if you ever do have to go to a shelter, just here are some things to keep in mind. First, you'll go through a screening process, like who are you, your name, who you with, that fun stuff. It's very important during that, I'll use the phrase again, that you voluntarily disclose, which means tell the volunteer, your medical conditions, if you forgot your medication, if you forgot any life-saving equipment like an oxygen tank, if you have a disability. Because we are still required by law to make any reasonable accommodation for you, even during disasters. But we can only really do that if you tell us what you need and what is going on. So make sure you, again, voluntarily disclose that information. The second is around pets. Does anyone in here have a pet? Okay. So one lesson we took away from Hurricane Katrina was during Hurricane Katrina, people were told you cannot bring your dogs and cats to the shelter, leave them at home. And this put people in a very uncomfortable situation because for a lot of us, our pets are our family. And so what unfortunately happened was people refused to evacuate, stayed with their dogs and cats, and then died when the levees ended up breaking about 6 to 8 hours later. So learning that lesson, you can bring pets to state shelters. Try to bring a crate, tags, food, all that good stuff. I can't promise you'll get to stay with your dogs and cats. What we sometimes do is open what's called a pet shelter, create them separately. It mostly has to do with how long will you be there. You can't have like a bunch of snakes and like dogs running around a gym, obviously. But again, it's not a barrier to entry. Now, if you know someone has a service animal, those do not count as pets. They exist in a completely different legal category. So service animals are okay at all times. Pets, you can bring them in. It's possible, though, that we might crate and store them separately. And finally, it's not like an airline. There is no one bag per person policy. So you can bring this bag that has a lot of cool survival stuff in it, fill another luggage with, again, clothing, something to occupy your mind, your medication, especially your medication. Now, along with that, regardless of the type of emergency, you have to have two things. You have to have the materials, which I'll get to in about 15 minutes. And the second is information, and that's what this packet's meant to do. Because a lot of us, we store our information on cell phones or on computers. That's fantastic. However, 9 times out of 10, any natural disaster, the first thing that goes is the power grid. So now none of the computers work. After about 20 hours, most of our cell phones will be drained by then, and if you can't charge them, those are gone. So we still want everyone to use the old school pen and paper to write down your personal information. So I refer to this as the mother packet. It'd probably take you about 40 minutes to fill out the whole thing, but the 40 minutes that you fill in on a random Wednesday could save your life and pay huge dividends 2 years from now, as was alluded to before. Did people hear about the Merrimack Valley gas leaks? I think it was 2018. And basically what happened, gas company overpressurized the line, gas seeped into people's houses, 4 p.m. on a Friday, houses decided to explode. We had to evacuate whole towns and communities. And some people were not allowed back into their homes for 3 or 4 months. You were forbidden from going in because we didn't know if it was going to explode. So they had to live in makeshift trailers. Now, everyone here, you probably have a filing cabinet, desk drawer, folder, where you just throw important documents in, like IRS stuff, medical stuff, whatever. You might only need it once every 5 months, But if you go through an emergency like that, which again did happen here in Massachusetts, you're going to want to have everything ready to go. And that's kind of what this packet's meant to do. I don't need to go through the whole thing page through page or line through line, but first page, biographical information, name, address, that fun stuff. Pages 2, 3, and 4, we want you to have 3 emergency contacts. Think of 2 people that live close to you that can get to you in a 15 to 20 minute time period. And then try to think of 1 person that lives in a different state. Because ideally, if Norfolk is hit with a natural disaster, chances are most of the people in this area will all be panicking. You might not be able to reach them by telephone, so they won't really be able to help you. But if you know someone who lives in Wisconsin, hopefully that person's nice and safe. You can call that person up and say, hey, turn on the news, something's crazy's happening. Can you call my brother? I'm going to pack for 10 minutes, and then I'll give you a call to figure out what's going on. So that person will be nice and safe. Also, if you have a smartphone, there's a really cool feature on just about all these phones where if I go to type in my password, it says emergency in the bottom left or bottom right corner. Most people are afraid to press that because they think it'll instantly call 911. That's not actually what happens. Let's say, for example, this fan falls, hits me on the head, I'm unconscious. There's enough first responders here, I'll probably be okay. But if somebody wanted to, if you took my phone, no one here knows my password, but if you were to press emergency, it brings up my father's phone number. And then you could call that and then just say, oh, hey, just so you know, your son was giving a training. He's going to this hospital, just wanted you to know. So it is a really cool thing just to have, especially if you have grandkids, younger ones. Whenever I find a lost phone, that's like the first thing I look at. They hide it in different locations in every smartphone. If you want to, though, after the training, I'm happy to kind of dig through it and stick around. So again, that's 3 emergency contacts. The next page is your medication. Like right now, I'm very calm and relaxed. I can't spell or pronounce most of my medication. I never remember how many milligrams each of the dosages is. So if you go to a shelter and you have to communicate to a volunteer what you need, you're not going to be able to do that unless you have it all written down. So make sure you do that. The next time you go to your doctor or CVS, Walgreens, your pharmacist, whatever, you can say, print out my prescription list. They'll print out everything for you. You can just throw it right in there. Now you have it. You don't have to bother looking at the labels. Next page, your medical conditions. Again, a lot of us use slang for our medical conditions, but if you have to communicate to, again, a 19-year-old volunteer, you need to have the full 23-letter Latin phrases written out so they know exactly what's going on. The following is about medical equipment, things like that. The last few pages are about your community plan, but as I mentioned before, I can't tell you what direction you should head in because I don't know what the event is. But everyone here, you should write out what is the quickest way out of your residence if you have to evacuate either your house or building. Now, if you live in a building, whether that's an apartment building, assisted living facility, if you live on the 2nd floor or above, and you have issues with mobility, meaning if we tell you to evacuate, you don't think you can get down a flight of stairs, every building has a plan to evacuate seniors, people with disabilities in that situation. But those plans sometimes differ. In some cities and towns, the building's plan is simply, we know who you are, you stay in that unit, the person who manages the site will now tell the fire department or police, 3L, this person has issues with mobility. Another version is we tell people to leave your apartment building, go to the stairwell, and wait in the stairwell. And if you yourself live in one of these situations, or if you know someone, they really should know what is one of those 2 plans. And so I would make sure that they talk to the building manager to make sure they know if there is an evacuation, what is it you want me to do? Because I live on the 4th floor and I can't get down the flight of stairs. Just something to think about. And then make sure they write down what the steps are. Now, I trust everyone here. You're going to fill this out. You're going to put it somewhere. But chances are you will fill it out. You'll throw it somewhere, and you'll forget where it is or that you even did it. That's okay. That's just kind of how people work. So we want you to write this down in 3 different locations. This is the first one, mother packet, the big one. The second, and some people here might have heard of this. I'm going to talk about it anyway. It's called the File of Life. If you do have this, when was the last time you checked it to make sure it's updated? If you don't have this, all it is a white piece of paper, red envelope, magnet on the back. It goes on your refrigerator. Because let's say somebody finds you, you're unconscious, they call 911, EMS gets there. One of the first things they want to know is what medication is this person on, what are their medical conditions. It's very hard to figure out like where this packet is, but every first responder knows to look on your refrigerator for this. And then it'll have listed out all of your medication, all that good stuff. Because every year people die from their residence to the hospital in the ambulance because maybe they're given something that counteracts with a drug that they just simply didn't know you had, or you have a medical condition that they weren't aware of. So make sure you do fill this out. I think we might have enough.
We do.
So we have enough to give everyone a new one anyway. We have even smaller ones too that you can put in like your purse or your wallet. So let's say if you're going out for a walk, you feel tightness in your chest, shortness of breath, you think, oh my God, I might be having a stroke or a heart attack. First step, always to call 911, either you yourself or just yell at someone to do it. My second step would be to take out that little version and just keep it in your hand. Because there's no way once the ambulance gets there, you're going to be able to articulate, I take this medicine, I take this medicine. Like you just won't be able to cognitively do that. No one could. You could just have this in your hand, give it to the person, and then just focus on your breathing. So that's the second step. The third place we want you to fill out this information is this nice little shiny blue packet that this all came in. So I always get a kick whenever I pass this out because the first thing people do is they spin it because it looks like it's written upside down in two different locations. I did not design this, but it's meant to be folded a certain way. If you're very curious, you just fold it the long version so that the upside down are almost, on top of each other. And then you just fold it like this. I did a horrible job one-handed, but at least makes it look like it makes sense. And all this is a summary of everything I've talked about so far. What does it mean to shelter in place? What equipment do you need? I'm going to get to that in about 3 minutes. The inside, that is where we want you to put your personal information for that third and final time. One last time, fold it any way you want. Put it in a Ziploc bag so it's waterproof. And then just put it right in the red bag. That way, if you panic and all you do is to remember to grab this, you'll be okay. You'll have your information. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about, actually two quick things, is it says active shooter / terrorism along the panel. It looks a little out of place. The reason that's there is I briefly mentioned at the beginning that while I technically am an employee of the state of Massachusetts, the Department of Homeland Security is the one that pays for all the bags. And whenever you take a government agency's money, they say, okay, but we want you to talk about this. So one of those two things is about an active shooter situation. So an active shooter is whenever there is gunfire and you think they are just shooting people indiscriminately. Now, simultaneously, it is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly rare for you to ever encounter this in your life. But second, it also happens all too often, as I'm sure, I think most notably in Brooklyn, maybe about a month to 5 weeks ago, there was a shooting in the subway. And they just want me to quickly go over what steps would you do if you find yourself in that type of a situation. And it does follow the steps of a natural disaster. So the first step is to evacuate, is to get out of the way. Now, in a lot of situations, though, this is very difficult to do. Because one, you don't really know if what you just heard was gunfire. Two, gunfire echoes. It bounces off everything. It's incredibly loud. So you really don't know what direction it's coming in. So the first step to evacuate is only if you know for sure that going this way is going to keep me safe, then we go that way. If you don't know that, then you do the second step, which is to shelter in place, which is to stay exactly where you are. Especially if you're ever in an indoor environment, going to shelter in place is normally what we train people to do because, again, we don't know what's going on or what direction. So if you're outside, what that looks like is getting low to the ground, getting behind something. If you're inside, what that looks like is shutting and locking the doors, staying out of look of the windows, turning off the lights, putting your phone to silent, stay nice and quiet. Step 3, that is when we tell people to fight. Reason that's a step is if I'm talking in front of, we'll say, a high school audience, somebody might think, oh, if I hear gunfire, I want to run towards it and stop the person. I, as a representative of the state, don't want you to do that because you'll be putting yourself in harm's way. Fourth and finally is to listen to the first responders when they get there, keep your hands visible, move nice and slow, do what they tell you to do. Not the most pleasant topic. I'm happy to answer questions if you do have any. Second thing they want me to mention is, do people constantly get phone calls and text messages that are basically telemarketers, scam calls, trying to get you to click something? So I was on a run of getting about 4 per day. Basically, no one will ever text you a link that you won free money, and it's real. All they are trying to get you to do is to click it. So if you ever get a text message from a number you don't know, and it says, oh, this is CVS, you come here all the time, you just won $100. No, you didn't. No one won $100. If you get a phone call and you do not know the person speaking, even if they say, we're your gas company, every single system in this country, you can simply say, mail it to me, and then just hang up the phone. If it's real, which maybe 1% of the time it is, simply say, mail it to me. And then they're not going to go through the trouble of the postage. So unless you know the person's voice, you know for sure that is your nephew, you do not tell anyone your credit card number. You never do any of that over the phone. So that was the second thing. But now, to cheer you all up, I can show you the free stuff you get. So in disaster world, there's something called the rule of 4. Every 4 minutes, you need to breathe. Every 4 hours, you need shelter, whether that's clothing or protection from the environment to keep your body temperature stable. Every 4 days, you need water, and every 4 weeks, you need food. It's not 100% correct, depending on your body type, age, and environment. I can probably make it 6.5 days without water. Nobody wants to do that. The purpose of these bags is not for us to be on a desert island fighting to survive. None of us will do well in that situation. These bags are used in 2 different scenarios, mostly. One is if we ever have a large-scale evacuation. So, for example, in Oregon, I think a year and a half ago, they had a big fire, and they had to evacuate 10% of the state of Oregon. If we ever had to evacuate 10% of the state of Massachusetts, that's roughly 700,000 people. If 700,000 people all got into cars and buses and started heading in the same direction, you'll be in traffic for 24 hours. Now, everyone here can make it 24 hours without food or water, but that would just be miserable. I think most recently, actually in Virginia, they had a snowstorm and people were just stuck on the highway for, again, 24 hours. You could not move. So do you have enough material to keep yourself just mentally alert and nourished? The second, and by far the most common usage people have used these bags in the past, is if we either have a shelter-in-place order or we have a big, big snowstorm and you cannot go outside. Everything's closed or you can't open your door anyway. So the golden rule is we want you all to be able to self-sustain without electricity, without anyone coming to help you for 3 days. Now, in California, during a different wildfire, they cut off power to about 250,000 people because they were trying to slow the pace of it and they didn't want the power lines to be running in a certain area. What they didn't do is tell everyone ahead of time, we're going to cut your power. And what happened was some senior citizens and people with disabilities died because they were by themselves, they lost power for a couple of days, nobody came to help them, and they weren't able to self-sustain. So the biggest thing you have to add, which is not in the bags, is food. We used to put a couple cans in here. You'll feel when you get these bags how heavy they really are. Also, I just don't think people liked the food I was buying, so people kept complaining. So buy your cans, buy dry goods, keep some in here, keep some in a cupboard. Think 3 days is the gold rule. But we do give you plenty of water. So each of these bags has 2 large packets of emergency water. It's not normal water, and what I mean by that is it's condensed, purified with a lot of electrolytes. So 2 of these individual bags are good per day per person, which means you have enough water so 2 or 3 people will be okay for 2 or 3 days. Also, they have a very long shelf life. The bottles of water that we all drink last roughly a year, and then they can hypothetically collect bacteria. These are good for 5 years. And so these were packaged August of 2021, and so these are good until August 2026. At which point, take them. You can throw them out, buy gallons of water, and then just recycle every year. We also got you a 5-gallon collapsible jug, so you can fill this up with even more liquids. You'll be okay. Now, at some point in your life, you heard the expression to fill up the bathtub during storms. So you can hypothetically drink the water that comes out of your shower. It's mostly just basic plumbing. The same water pipe that goes to your bathroom sink is the same water pipe that goes to your bathroom shower. besides the hot water tank that you have. And so if your water is good enough to drink from that tap, it's good enough to drink from the shower. However, unless there's flooding, because whenever there's flooding, we really don't know what is getting into the water and into the sewage water. And at the end of your bathtub, you have a sewage pipe, and that's connected to the sewage network. So if there's ever flooding, we do not want you to fill up the bathtub and then drink that water, because we really don't know what's in it. Your tap water should still be okay. 99% of the time, that's fine, and the city will put out some sort of an alert to make sure if for some reason you have massive flooding, and they might be worried about that. But again, that's why we got you the emergency water. So you have the collapsible jug. One of the most common injuries we see is people slice their hands trying to open cans that they bought like 4 years ago. So we bought you all a new can opener. A little hand guard right there. You'll keep yourself safe. Also, the very tip of it has a pretty sharp edge. You can use that to open all the different types of plastics that we have here in case you're not physically strong enough. So that little end, you can just scrape it to the side to be able to get what you need. We got you some new masks, just in case we're still living in the COVID era. You'll be able to keep yourself safe. Multiple packets of tissues. People will be crying. Also, if you're stuck in traffic for 2 days and you need to pull over and use the bathroom, we have you covered on that end. That always gets a chuckle. There we go. We got you a little first aid kit, bandages. Make sure you treat any cuts or scrapes because diseases spread rapidly during shelters. We also got you 2 feminine hygiene pads. So they have their initial use, but if you look at these Band-Aids, this is actually the best bandage in the bag. And so if you yourself or you're with somebody gets a really bad cut, they're bleeding a lot, the number one rule is pressure. Just run at the person or for yourself, take your hand and apply as much force as possible. If you have these though, you can take them out, stack them together. Same thing with your hand, apply pressure. This is also when I like to mention if you're going out for a walk or you're with somebody and someone gets a puncture wound, maybe they trip and fall and something goes into their body. If something ever goes into your or their body, do not pull it out. It's basically physics. Once this enters your body, it now becomes a part of you. When you pull it out, it creates an air vacuum that then the things on the inside shoot out of, and that's the opposite of what we want to happen. So you would just try to dress around it. As always, call 911 as soon as you can. They know how to handle it better than we do. We also got you a personal hygiene kit because chances are if you're evacuating, you forgot to get your toothbrush. So you'll be okay with all that good stuff. There's a little red bag in here. It's called a bio bag. If you're in a small environment, somebody's sneezing, blowing their nose a lot, you can just take the tissues, put it in here. It does a much better job keeping in bacteria than plastic does. We got you some emergency blankets. I think when I was a kid, these were called NASA blankets. If you watch the Boston Marathon, when they crossed the finish line, they were getting wrapped in this. What it does is it traps in your body heat, about like 90 to 95% of it. So if you ever do lose power, I think all the cold nights are behind us, but next winter you lose power, you're freezing. Remember, you do have these. You can just take that, wrap your body with it, take a blanket, put it on top. It'll just trap in your body heat. We also got you plenty of ponchos. Take them in case you're evacuated, keep the water off you. If there's some fun event going on in Norfolk, you might think to yourself, oh, I have free ponchos, I'm gonna take one. You can. I want you to live your life, have fun. But just keep in mind that there's no one alive that could take this out of the baggie, then refold it and put it back in the baggie. It just can't be done. These are probably $1 each at a CVS. So with everything in here, use it if you need it, but then just remember I need to restock it. We also got you some hand warmers. They say they're good for 10 hours. I've never used a hand warmer that can make it longer than like 3, maybe 4. It's basically a little sandbag, in case you've never used them before. You just take the sandbag, punch it a few times, you'll feel the chemicals start to heat up. We got you some tools for communication. If you're trapped by yourself, you need help, we have a little whistle. If your car breaks down in the middle of the night, you have a little glow stick. Just take it out of the baggie. It's a tube of plastic, bend it. The two chemicals combine, visible up to a mile, spin it around, try to get a car to help you out. And last but not least, kind of the best bang for your buck, are the little 4-in-1 flashlight radios. So we used to give the flashlight radios that had those big Duracell batteries, but what happened 5 years from now was the batteries would just be dead. So this doesn't use a battery. What it uses instead is a little hand crank. 1 minute of doing this will give you 10 minutes of power. So you'll have a flashlight, there's a radio so you can figure out what's going on. There's a noise maker, which operates like a whistle to try to get people's attention. But the coolest thing it can do is it can charge your cell phones. So it is almost, and I'm using the word almost deliberately, a universal device that at one end of your cell phone charger goes into the phone. The other end has what's called a USB port. It's a little rectangular piece of metal that has a little white strip in it. And then normally you take that, you plug it into a box with the outlet, then you take the outlet, you plug it into the wall. You can take that USB cord, plug it in here, and then spin. Now, I can do it. I've killed my iPhone and then gotten a charge. But these are basically mini computers. It takes a lot of power to generate. This is just my way of saying give it to the healthiest person you're with and tell them to go nuts for 10 minutes, and they'll be able to eventually get a charge. But if you have the old school phones, flip phones, a phone that can just call or text or whatever, those are very easy to charge. And everyone here has enough upper body strength just to do this for 2 minutes. You'll be able to call first responders, call your loved ones, whatever you need to do. So on top of everything here, again, make sure you add food. Also, make sure you add your personal information. Some people ask me if they should keep this in their car or in their house. I want you to keep it wherever you're going to remember where it is. Like, I'm lucky enough, because I manage the program, I have one in my vehicle, I have one in my apartment. However, because there is water in this, whenever water over the winter freezes, it expands, could theoretically break out of the package and damage the equipment. So just keep that in mind. But again, things like the glow stick is really good to have in your vehicle. So use it the best way you can. And before I leave you all today, I have an ask of you. So I have a fun job where really all I do is I travel across Massachusetts. I put on trainings like this, and then I go home. And this is my way of saying that the government doesn't really know if I'm physically here right now. This is being recorded, so I guess they could figure it out. But if I wanted to, I could just text Department of Homeland Security and say, oh yeah, I did the training today, like thank you for the paycheck, and then just never showed up. I don't want to do that. So what we have instead is I have a little evaluation. It's almost like you're a teacher. All you have to do is check the boxes. If you thought that you learned something today, you check agree. Some of the ones at the bottom don't apply. You can leave them blank. If you thought this was okay, you can say partly agree. If you thought this was horrible, you can say disagree. Will hurt my feelings, but I'm going to give you the bags anyway, so you can be honest. That's okay. I'm going to pass around some pens too. Try to give the pens back. If you really fall in love with it, it's not the worst thing in the world if you take it. So I'm going to pass these out. I'll answer any questions that you have, and then we'll pass out the bags after. Before I do see maybe a question or so. Sir, did you have a question?
No, I have a statement. Some of us have generators.
Oh,
The
perfect.
lights go out, plug in the generator.
If you have the means to have a generator, highly recommend you have a generator. My parents do. Did anyone else, because we do have a lot of different people, well, actually, let's do questions first, and then if anyone else had a statement or anything like that. Yes, please.
I have a question. I have a medical alert bracelet. Does anybody ever look at that when there's an emergency?
Yes.
I mean, I will say short, yes. That information comes in handy. So if you have
I'm thinking that doesn't take the place of filling out all the drugs and all the other stuff.
No, all of these systems, you want them to overlap. So if you imagine them like safety nets, so if you have something like that, which has your personal like pharmaceutical information, that's one net. Another net is to have this information. Another net is to have it on your computer, so on and so forth. But okay, I'm going to pass these out, but you've been a fantastic audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I shut it off if you want.
Oh, okay. So we have bags. I have half of them put together, so at the end I'll finish up. But these are bags that you can put copies of important documents. The suggestions are actually listed on the bag. Copy of your photo IDs, driver's license, social security cards, things like that. And this seals like a Ziploc bag. And again, it has some suggestions. So whatever you think you need, it's good to just make those copies and keep it in either the red bag or this bag. This bag is also good. It's a string bag. It's very light, and you can add a pair of socks and underclothes and things like that just to have some spares. So we have this bag, and again, the suggestions on what to put in are listed on the bag. We also give you a lanyard. You can wear your keys around your collar, especially if you have to go into a shelter or something like that. You'll have them close by. And Evan was talking about the ping alerts. I have it on my phone, and just so you know, you can play around with it. You can actually customize it so that you can get alerts for where your kids live, where your work or whatever, and know, so if you're away, if you're on the Cape, you'll know if there's something happening at home too. You can put your home address in, so it will be for wherever you are in Massachusetts, but you can also stay on top of any kind of emergency happening with address of somebody you love or your work. This guide actually is put out by FEMA, and you can keep it on your fridge. So if you do get an alert and you're at home, you can look it up, and it, so for extreme, this one's extreme heat, but so say you get a high wind alert, and this will explain like things that you can do to keep yourself safe, and you can put that on your refrigerator. We also have vaccine card protectors. So if you have a vaccine card, you can protect it in your bag. And we have, like Evan was saying, the small wallet-sized files of life. You can put this in your glove compartment as well. If you may have yellow dot, but if you don't, you can use this. And we have stickers, so you can put a sticker on your glove compartment, or you can put it on your door. Although the firefighters will tell you, it's the first place they look is on your refrigerator for this one. So you want to make sure. A lot of people may already have this at home, and you might just want to update it with a new sheet, or write in pencil so you can erase and update that list. We gave you it's a keychain flashlight in case you need it. So I always give those out. And these are for the back of your phone. You can take off the adhesive and put it on the back of your cell phone. If you have a cell phone that you can put this on, it wouldn't work on a flip phone or anything, but you can keep your license, your health card, Medicare card, credit card, whatever you need. In the case of an emergency, you could, keep it really close and keep it on your phone and know that that's there. I actually keep it, that way I don't have to take out a wallet or anything like that. And then we have, this is just another ID card personal information card. And if you're bored, we have nail files. Everyone knows the district attorney hands out these great nail files. Or if you're MacGyver, you could actually make it into some kind of tool to help you in an emergency. But and we have, like I said, I have half of them put together, so I'll give out those half. Those the completed ones, and then if you wouldn't mind, just wait. It'll only take a second for me to throw everything together. But what did everybody think? Isn't Evan great?
Thank you.
And when you get home, you can just flip through these books. These are really, there's a lot of other information. I can't get through it all, but those packets are really helpful.
Does anyone have any questions for Gail or Evan? I know you got a lot of really great information in addition to some awesome swag today. So thank you again for
And if anybody has any questions for the firefighters, like Norfolk specific, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer it. Or for our state trooper, Farah, who kindly came, if there's any questions you have, just raise your hand.